Ramalinga Raju. He was the legend of India's IT revolution, the farmer's son who built a technology empire worth billions, 53,000 employees, 66 countries, a name that made India proud. But on January 7, 2009, Raju, founder of Satyam Computers, sat down and did something nobody expected. He confessed, not because he was caught, because he could no longer carry the weight of the lie. What would happen to his 53,000 employees? What would happen to the clients across 66 countries who trusted him? And what would happen to the millions of young Indians who had looked at Raju and believed that anything was possible? This is the story of one of the most heartbreaking collapses in computer history. To understand the betrayal, you first have to understand the dream. 1991. India opened its economy to the world. Liberalization, foreign investment, global trade. After decades of closed markets and controlled growth, India was suddenly connected to everything, and one sector moved faster than any other: information technology. Indian engineers, brilliant, rigorously trained, English-speaking, were exactly what a globalizing world needed. Cheaper than American developers, better educated than most alternatives, available in enormous numbers from institutions like the IITs that produced world-class talent year after year. Hyderabad became one of the centers of this transformation, a city that reinvented itself around software, glass office buildings rising from what had been agricultural land, young engineers arriving from villages across Andhra Pradesh to write code for banks in New York, retailers in London, manufacturers in Tokyo. It felt like more than business. It felt like proof that India could compete, could lead, could matter on the global stage. In that context, the founders of India's great IT companies were not just entrepreneurs, they were national heroes. Ramalinga Raju was born in 1954, the son of a farmer in Andhra Pradesh, not the privileged background that produced many of India's business elite. A man who had built everything himself, from the fields of rural Andhra to the boardrooms of global corporations. He founded Satyam Computer Services in 1987, the name chosen carefully, Satyam, Sanskrit for truth, a company whose very name was a statement of values. Through the late 1980s and 1990s, Satyam grew relentlessly. The outsourcing boom that transformed Indian IT found Satyam perfectly positioned. Global multinationals needed software development, maintenance, testing. Satyam delivered all of it, reliably, competitively, at scale. By the 2000s, the client list read like a who's who of global business: General Electric, Nestle, Caterpillar, Ford, Citigroup. 53,000 employees working across Hyderabad and delivery centers worldwide. Listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange, the National Stock Exchange, and in 2001 on the New York Stock Exchange itself, an Indian software company, ringing the bell on Wall Street. The symbolism was enormous. Raju received the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award, was celebrated in Davos, photographed with world leaders, named on lists of Asia's most admired business people. The farmer's son from Andhra Pradesh had built something that made India proud. But the accounts were a fiction, not from the beginning. That is important to understand. Satyam was a real company, doing real work for real clients. The engineers were genuinely skilled. The projects genuinely delivered. The foundation was authentic. The fraud began as something smaller, a gap between what Satyam actually earned and what Raju needed it to appear to earn. As a publicly listed company, Satyam faced quarterly earnings expectations, analysts watching, investors expecting growth, the pressure that every public company CEO feels to meet the number every single quarter. When Satyam's actual performance fell slightly short, Raju made a choice. Adjust the numbers, just enough, just this once. Bridge the gap between reality and expectation. Tell the story the market wanted to hear. It worked. The quarter passed. Nobody questioned it. The next quarter came. The gap was there again. The adjustment was made again. And so it continued. Quarter after quarter. Year after year. Each adjustment requiring a slightly larger one to maintain the fiction. Each inflated profit requiring inflated cash balances to make the balance sheet balance. Each invented number requiring more invented numbers to support it. By 2008, the fraud had been running for 7 years. Several consecutive quarters of manipulated accounts. $1.47 billion in cash that existed on paper did not exist in any bank. Fictitious interest income, inflated revenue, understated liabilities. A financial picture so divorced from reality that the real Satyam and the reported Satyam had become two entirely different companies. And through all of it, PricewaterhouseCoopers signed off the accounts, one of the world's most respected audit firms. Two PwC partners who should have found the fraud, who should have verified the bank balances, who should have asked the questions that would have unraveled everything. They didn't. Both were later convicted, fined, their careers destroyed. The auditors who were supposed to be the last line of defense had become part of the problem. There was a warning that nobody connected. In September 2008, the World Bank announced that Satyam was banned from World Bank contracts for 8 years. Allegations of data theft and bribery of bank staff. A serious public rebuke from one of the world's most important institutions. The Indian press covered it. Analysts noted it. Nobody connected it to something deeper. Nobody asked whether a company capable of that might be capable of more. The warning was there, in plain sight, unread. Then in December 2008, Raju made a catastrophic mistake. He announced that Satyam would acquire 2 companies, Mehta's Infrastructure and Mehta's Properties, family-owned businesses controlled by the Raju family, for $1.6 billion of Satyam's money. Pause on the name. Mehta's. Spell it backwards. S-A-T-Y-A-M. Satyam spelled backwards. The family companies Raju was trying to buy with his shareholders' money, named as a private joke, hidden in plain sight. The shareholder reaction was immediate and furious. Institutional investors revolted. The stock fell 55% in a single day. International investors threatening legal action. The board under enormous pressure. Raju withdrew the acquisition within hours, but the damage was done. Questions were being asked that he couldn't answer. The scrutiny was intensifying. The tiger he had been riding for 7 years was starting to turn. On January 7, 2009, Ramalinga Raju sat down and wrote a letter. Not to regulators, not to lawyers, not to advisors, to his board of directors, directly. 4 pages, written personally, confessing everything. The cash balances were fictitious. The accrued interest was non-existent. The understated liabilities were real. $1.47 billion that the balance sheet showed simply did not exist. He described it himself, riding a tiger, not knowing how to get off without being eaten. Each quarter the gap widened. Each year the fiction grew larger, until there was no way to close it quietly. No acquisition, no transaction, no accounting adjustment could bridge a gap of $1.47 billion. So he confessed. Not because he was caught, because he could no longer carry it. The letter was delivered to the board on January 7, 2009. Within hours it was with regulators. By afternoon it was public. By evening, Raju was arrested. The stock lost 78% of its value in a single day. Clients began reviewing their contracts immediately. 53,000 employees arrived at work the next morning, not knowing whether they still had jobs. India's stock market fell sharply. The country that had held Satyam up as proof of what was possible was in shock. But here is where India's story diverges from most corporate fraud collapses. The government moved with remarkable speed. The board was reconstituted within days. A new independent board appointed. Kiran Karnik, the former head of NASSCOM, leading the rescue. The message to the world was clear. India's IT industry was not Satyam. Satyam was one company, one founder, one fraud. The industry was 53,000 innocent engineers who deserved better. The search for a buyer began immediately. Tech Mahindra, backed by British Telecom, emerged as the winning bidder. In April 2009, just 3 months after the confession, Tech Mahindra acquired Satyam, and the company was renamed Mahindra Satyam. Later merged fully into Tech Mahindra. 53,000 jobs saved, clients retained, projects continued. The engineers who had built their careers on genuine skill, given the chance to continue. Raju was convicted in 2015, sentenced to 7 years in prison, along with his brother and several other executives. PwC's India partners separately convicted. The case that changed Indian corporate governance permanently. Satyam means truth in Sanskrit. That remains the cruelest detail in the whole story. Raju didn't choose that name cynically. He chose it as an aspiration, a statement of what he intended to build, a company worthy of the name. For years it was. The engineers were real. The clients were real. The work was real. The pride that India felt was justified by what those 53,000 people actually did. The fraud existed alongside the reality, not instead of it. That is what makes Satyam different from a pure invention like Theranos. Satyam worked. It just didn't work as well as Raju needed it to appear to work. And that gap between reality and appearance became the space where the lies lived. Raju didn't set out to defraud the world. He set out to impress it, to meet the expectations that his own success had created, to protect the dream that his farmer's son story had come to represent. And when the gap between reality and expectation became too wide to bridge honestly, he chose deception over admission, appearance over truth. The name he had chosen for his company over the values that name was supposed to represent. Pride is a dangerous fuel. It burns clean at first, bright, hot, impressive. Then it burns everything: the company, the dream, the name, everything except the lesson it leaves behind. In a country where so many had invested so much hope in the idea that Indian engineers could power the planet, Satyam's fall was not just a corporate scandal, it was a betrayal of something larger. The dream survived. Indian IT survived.